The demon god was dead. The devil monarch and the others hadn't expected such an outcome. The demon god had the upper hand from the beginning, and it was the demon god who'd been suppressing Yang Yi in battle. However, the demon god hadn't been able to resist Yang Ye's final attack. Yang Yi had been superior in the end, the number one expert below the progenitor realm. Bang! Suddenly, an explosion resounded from the side. Yang Yi looked over, and he saw the monkey had just made a tiny mistake in battle against those sages and had been blasted away. As soon as he was blasted away, over a dozen sages pounced at him. Yang Yi was about to attack, but 10 figures obstructed Yang Ye's path. They were led by the spirit god, sovereign of sky, devil monarch, shaman king, and barbaric king. Besides them, the rest were experts among experts. Obviously, they weren't planning to fight him one-on-one this time. The facts proved that fighting Yang Yi in single combat was a foolish decision. Suddenly, a terrifying aura came from the side. All the sages looked over, and they saw the monkey's body was expanding madly, and a towering monkey instantly appeared there. At this moment, the monkey was over 1 kilometer tall, extremely huge, and simply seemed like a small city, an ancient titan monkey. That was the monkey's true form. The monkey rarely used his true form because very few could force him to use it. At this moment, even someone as strong as the monkey couldn't resist the joint forces of over a dozen sages. He would probably have no chance to return to his true form if he still refused to use it. Once he returned to his true form, the golden rod in his grasp suddenly grew by a few hundred times. At this moment, a powerful aura swept out from the monkey, and he simply felt invincible. As for the other sages around him, they had extremely solemn expressions on their faces. Regardless of whether it was in terms of strength or defense, both of them had grown tremendously for the monkey. It could be said that the true battle had only just begun. Let's fight! Suddenly, the monkey roared with fury, and then he leaped up and charged at the sages while his powerful strength shook the world around him. Yang Yi withdrew his gaze and looked at Nanjing. At this moment, there were multiple sages around her too. There were many injuries on her, and she was being suppressed too. She was practically only able to passively defend herself. If it wasn't for her extraordinary combat instinct and extremely powerful strength, she would be dead by now. Yang Ye's heart sank when he noticed the situation she was in. He was about to do something when her voice suddenly resounded in his mind. "Let me do it myself." As soon as she finished speaking, Elysium left her grasp, and it transformed into a ray of light that shot forward. Over a dozen sages in front of her were blasted away. An instant later, she slowly raised both her palms, and the battlefield instantly trembled. After that, strands of faint energy appeared on her hands. Natural energy! Suddenly, one of the sages exclaimed. There were 3 types of energy at the beginning of the world: primordial violet energy, natural energy, and chaos energy. Each of them carried different effects. Natural energy was something that everyone had in their bodies. When they were in the womb, what did they rely on to breathe? It was natural energy. However, it would vanish when they were born. But it actually didn't really vanish, and it remained within the body. Of course, not everyone's natural energy would remain within the body. Only those with special physiques like Nanjing's martial god physique were capable of preserving the natural energy in the body. Moreover, it could only preserve it, and it was absolutely difficult for the owner to control it. Very few in the world could accomplish it, and Nanjing was one of them. Meanwhile, she suddenly vanished on the spot, and she was in front of the sages when she appeared again. A moment later, she slammed her fist forward. Bang! A sage before her instinctively defended himself, but he hadn't even been able to react before he was obliterated. The others were shocked by this scene. World Crusher! Suddenly, Nanjing's voice resounded, and then a huge palm appeared. A moment later, he slammed down at the sages here. Just as it was named, it seemed like it was capable of crushing the world. Yang Yi withdrew his gaze at this point. She could persist for some time. Regardless of whether it was a Nanjing or the monkey, while they couldn't win, they could hold on for some time, just a while. What about him? Xianxia slowly closed his eyes as he gazed at the sages before him. Run? That was impossible. Fight. Fight to the death. Xianxia opened his eyes and looked up at the sky. Brother Monkey Jinger, if nothing unexpected happens, then today will be the day we die. So, let's kill to our heart's content. As soon as he finished speaking, his sword trembled, and then he transformed into a ray of light that shot forward. The first to step forward was the Devil Monarch. His eyes narrowed slightly while he raised his right hand slowly. In an instant, a pitch-black tombstone flashed out from his palm. It expanded in the air and instantly expanded hundreds of times. At the same time, countless strands of black energy shot out like bolts of lightning. Xianxia's sword energy was instantly covered in the lightning, and the powerful force it carried instantly blasted Xianxia away. However, Xianxia suddenly vanished while his figure was blasted away. He was behind the Devil Monarch when he appeared again. Backstab. However, as soon as he appeared behind the Devil Monarch, a middle-aged man with crimson-red hair suddenly appeared in front of him. The man had a blood-red skeleton in his grasp, and it stopped Xianxia's attack. Moreover, a strand of red energy swept out from it and enveloped Xianxia in an instant. Meanwhile, a sword howl resounded within the red energy, and then a ray of sword energy tore through it. However, a pillar of red energy slammed against Xianxia's stomach. Bam! Xianxia was instantly blasted away. At the moment he was blasted away, the barbaric king suddenly appeared behind him, and he had a huge pitch-black hammer in his grasp. He slammed it at Xianxia's head. Xianxia couldn't dodge this attack. Xianxia didn't dodge it and just allowed it to strike his head. At the moment the hammer was about to strike Xianxia's head, the barbaric king was stunned. Xianxia's going to die just like this? He was very confident that if Xianxia didn't defend himself or dodge his attack, then the hammer would obliterate Xianxia. However, his expression changed drastically when it actually struck Xianxia's head, because a thin layer of armor had appeared on Xianxia's head. The primordial armor. Xianxia had activated the primordial armor at the critical moment. At the same time, Xianxia stabbed his sword against the barbaric king's chest. Hiss! It sliced off half of the barbaric king's body, and then Xianxia's figure flashed over 1 kilometer to the right. However, as soon as he stopped himself, a wave of mysterious energy enveloped him. At this instantly, his mind was dazed, and he felt like he'd fallen into an abyss. The Shaman Emperor. A shaman technique. It was a familiar feeling. Xianxia was alarmed. Suddenly, the primordial pagoda shook within him, and then golden light enveloped Xianxia's body. Or to be more precise, it protected his soul. As soon as it did that, the uncomfortable feeling he had vanished. Meanwhile, the Shaman Emperor had appeared behind Xianxia. However, his reaction was swift, and he swung a backhand stab at the Shaman Emperor. Bang! Xianxia and the Shaman Emperor were blasted away from each other, but a few sages immediately charged at him. In the primordial pagoda, at this moment, Snowy was beyond anxious, and there were pearls of tears in her eyes. The little fellow was jumping about and seemed to be trying to figure out a solution. As for Xianxia, she stood there silently. Outside the primordial pagoda, the battle was at its peak. Even if the money, and Nanjing, and Xianxia used all their trump cards, losing was unavoidable. It was only a matter of time before they lost, and losing undoubtedly represented death for them. An old man stood silently far away in the sky. It was the Tao progenitor. Of course, he wasn't standing by idly because he was emotionless. It was the overall situation in the large universe that made the entire universe target Xianxia. If the Tao path took Xianxia's side and went against the times, it would have to go against the entire large universe. The consequence of that was annihilation. He wasn't all alone, and he had the Tao path to protect. A single mistake could bring the annihilation of the Tao path. Xianxia had the Sprite Lord and refused to give it up, so it was an impossible dilemma. Actually, the Alliance of All wouldn't let him live even if he gave up the Sprite Lord. Since they were enemies with a genius like Xianxia, it was best to annihilate him before he could grow further. Otherwise, the day he grew to his peak was the day they would face annihilation. They wanted the Sprite Lord, But Yang Yi had to die too. That was what the alliance of all, the Buddhist path and the weapon path wanted. The Tao progenitor remained silent for a long time, and then he sighed and left. Meanwhile, two women stood silently at the side. It was Ding Xiaoyao and Jir. Jir asked, "Are we not going to do anything?" Ding Xiaoyao spoke with indifference on her face. "Wait. Until when?" asked Jir. Ding Xiaoyao stared at the battlefield for a long time before she answered. "Once they die in battle and cripple the alliance of all sages." Her voice was icy cold as ice, and there wasn't a trace of emotion in it. The god race had 26 sages right now, but it was clearly not enough when facing the alliance of all and the two other paths. If the god race wanted to take advantage of the situation and reap the reward, then it had to wait. It had to wait until Yang Yi and Nanjing and the monkey crippled the alliance of all. Only then could the god race be the biggest and final winner. Jir glanced at Ding Xiaoyao and remained silent. The god race. She knew that Ding Xiaoyao had ultimately chosen to prioritize the god race over her own feelings. She would take Yang Ye's side when there was no conflict between them, but when there was conflict, she chose the god race. Of course, she had to. If Ding Xiaoyao didn't take the god race's side, then Jir would remove Ding Xiaoyao from her position without the slightest hesitation. Even if Yang Yi had shown her kindness, the god race was most important to Jir. Regardless of whether it was her or Ding Xiaoyao, the god race's interests were everything to them. The battle in the distance was still going on. However, at this moment Nanjing, the monkey, and Yang Yi were heavily injured. Especially the monkey. One of his arms had been blasted into bits. Besides that, the scales all around his body had been smashed open too, and blood was seeping out incessantly like a fountain from him. It was extremely shocking. As for Yang Yi and Nanjing, their condition wasn't much better. Fight. As far as they were concerned, they could only fight to the death. Suddenly, ripples surged through the battlefield, and then an invisible barrier appeared here. A moment later, 11 women appeared on the battlefield. They were led by Sky Maiden. Sky Maiden looked off into the distance, and then ferocity flashed through her eyes. An instant later, she opened her eyes and roared. Boom! A huge mouth suddenly appeared like a beast that could swallow the universe, and bit down at the sages in the distance. Heaven Devourer. At this moment, the mouth seemed like it could devour the heavens. The sages there were shocked. They didn't dare act carelessly, and the spirit god shot upward and waved his hands. An invisible wave of force surged out like a torrent from his palms. Boom! Beams of energy slammed incessantly against the mouth. Besides that, the devil monarch waved his right hand, and a huge black tombstone shot upward and smashed itself against the mouth. Bang! The mouth cracked open and transformed into countless fragments of energy that rained down through the battlefield. Meanwhile, Sky Maiden spat out multiple mouthfuls of blood, and her countenance instantly turned extremely pale. However, her interference had bought Yang Yi, the monkey, and Nanjing some time to rest, and they immediately converged together. Nether Maiden and the others couldn't bear to look at them when they saw the horrifying state Yang Yi and the others were in. At this moment, Yang Yi was covered in blood. It was impossible to discern if the blood belonged to him or his enemies. Besides that, his sword was covered in chipped areas. Those chips in his sword had been forcefully smashed open during battle. Moreover, if one looked carefully, one would notice that his entire body was covered in injuries. While he had the primordial armor, it couldn't be used without restraint, and he could only use it at critical moments. So, at most times, he could only use his body to forcefully resist the attacks thrown at him. And Nanjing was slightly better, just slightly. Her instinct in combat was extraordinary. So, while they could injure her, it was very difficult for them to cause lethal damage to her when she wanted to dodge their attacks. However, she wasn't in a much better state. While she hadn't lost any limbs, her internal organs had cracked open. It had been cracked open by the force of the impact she suffered. The Devil Monarch gazed at Sky Maiden's group. Who are all of you? Sky Maiden glanced at the Devil Monarch's group, and then she gazed at Yang Yi. Are you all right? Yang Yi wiped off the blood on the corner of his mouth and gazed at them. Why did you come? Meanwhile, she walked over to Yang Yi, rubbed his head and said, "Since you call us your sisters, we naturally have to take your side. We've left the Nether Pavilion." Yang Yi shook his head. He was just about to speak when blood seeped out of his mouth before he could say anything. Yang Yi wiped off the blood on the corners of his mouth again and said, "All of you will die. Listen to me and leave. Leave now. You still can make it." Blood Maiden smiled. "Would you stand by idly if we're attacked by a group of experts?" Yang Yi wanted to say something else, but Blood Maiden shook her head. "Forget that. Just leave with us. Leave." A vicious glow flashed through the Devil Monarch's eyes. "How laughable! Can you even leave?" As soon as he said that, a few dozen sages surrounded all of them. The sages of the entire alliance of all were over 100 in number. Besides those who had died in battle earlier, there were still over 100 here. Besides the god race, it could be considered as the entire force of the large universe. Sky Maiden closed her eyes slowly. She'd expected this, but she'd still chosen to come. Die with Yang Yi? They hadn't thought that much about it, and Sky Maiden hadn't given it any thought. After she awakened completely, there was something she could never forget, and it was that only a single person stood by her side when Profounder Continent was on the verge of collapse, and the Eye of the Heaven Tao wanted to kill her. That person told her that she didn't have to be afraid because he was there. That person was Yang Yi. Besides that, Yang Yi stepped forward when the others from the Nether Pavilion were in trouble. She'd planned to come alone today, but her plan had failed. Nether Maiden and the others had chosen to come, and none of them had tried to stop her. Sky Maiden closed her eyes slowly. "Since you refuse to let us go, then let's fight. Count me in." Suddenly, a voice came from afar, and Yang Yi looked over to its source. The owner of the voice had a robust figure and a spiked club on her resting against her shoulder. It was none other than Amon. Yang Yi shook his head. "Big sister man, what are you doing here?" "You..." Meanwhile, Amon said, "I gave it some thought and decided to do this in the end. If I don't come, I will never be able to rest at ease. Who can live forever in this world? I think no one can accomplish that. Now it's the end times, so I may die at any moment. Since only death awaits, isn't it better to die with a brother?" "Ha ha!" Suddenly, roaring laughter came from afar. They looked over and saw a group of young men flashing over. It was none other than Yu Jing who was leading them, and Mad Saber, Qin Chuan, and Ling among them too. All of the others by Yu Jing's side were the other brothers who had gone through life and death with Yang Yi in the dead dimension. Qin Chuan and the others went over to Yang Ye's side, and then Qin Chuan chuckled. "Are you very surprised? Is it a huge pleasant surprise?" "Ha ha!" Yang Yi shook his head. "This really isn't necessary. Even if you didn't come, I would still consider all of you as my brothers." Qin Chuan shook his head and interrupted Yang Yi. "You're wrong. What are brothers? We go through thick and thin together, that's what brothers do. Only useless trash brothers would only share in the happiness but refuse to help when difficulties arise." Mad Saber nodded. "Indeed." Meanwhile, Ling, who didn't really like to talk, said, "We know what you're worried about. Indeed, you and Nanjing are the most dazzling geniuses in the younger generation of the large universe right now. But who's below both of you? It's all of us who crawled out of the dead dimension. We may be unable to kill a sage, but if I'm willing to risk my life, then I have at least a 50% chance to kill a sage." Qin Chuan chuckled. "I'm a little better. I have around a 55% chance." "Ha ha!" Yang Yi glanced at them and said, "All that matters is the heart. I would still consider all of you as brothers even if you didn't come. This is my own personal business, and it really isn't necessary to interfere in this. Moreover, it really isn't necessary to drag down your clans and sects for me. All of you aren't alone, you have to think about the organizations you represent." "We're all alone now," Qin Chuan said abruptly. "We left our clans and sects before coming. Presently, we have no link to our former clans and sections. We are alone, and we only represent ourselves." Yang Yi gazed at them for a long time and said, "Is it worth it? You'll die. When did you become so long-winded?" Yu Jing suddenly said, This isn't the Yang Yi we knew. Exactly. Qin Chuan added. You're actually speaking about whether it's worth it. You could have left safely by yourself in the dead dimension, yet you turned around and came back for us. Did you consider if it was worth it at the time? Moreover, if it wasn't for you, we would have died in the dead dimension. As far as we are concerned, dying in the end times is really not worth it, but dying with you in battle is really worth it. Yang Yi laughed bitterly. All of you. The group from the Nether Pavilion and Amon's group. Besides Sky Maiden, all of them weren't sages. However, they were the greatest geniuses in the large universe besides a Nanjing and Yang Yi. If Yang Yi and a Nanjing didn't exist, they would be the most dazzling geniuses in the large universe. The reason they weren't that renowned was mainly because of Yang Yi and a Nanjing's presence. They were too brilliant and casted a shadow upon the other geniuses. Simply speaking, if they died here today, then even if the other races could survive through the end times, they would have a lack of experts in a generation. In other words, they would have no one to continue leading their respective races. The Devil Monarch and the others understood this, but they had no other choice. The Devil Monarch closed his eyes slowly. Kill! Suddenly, a sword howl resounded from afar, and then a ray of sword energy tore through space and descended here. Everyone looked toward it. Yang Yi was slightly stunned. It feels familiar. The sword intent it emanated was quite familiar to him. Everyone watched as a woman in a green dress appeared before them. Yang Yi frowned when he saw her, because he didn't recognize her at all. After she arrived, her gaze immediately descended onto Yang Yi. She smiled. Long time no see. Yang Yi asked, Who are you? She smiled. Do you really not remember me? Yang Yi shook his head. You seem a little familiar, but I'm sure that I've never seen you before. Of course. She smiled. I was just a child when we met. Now, I've grown up. A child. Yang Yi was stunned. Meanwhile, she flicked a strand of sword intent over to him. That's... Yang Yi gazed at it with astonishment, because it was his own sword intent. While it was very weak, it was his. She walked over to him and said, Situ Ting Yun. Yang Yi was stunned for quite some time before he spoke with astonishment. Why, you're that little girl, Ting Yun. At this moment, Yang Yi recalled that he'd given a young girl in the lower universe 3 strands of his sword intent because of her natural talent. He'd just done so casually without any objectives. He'd done it all because he felt her natural talent wasn't bad, and he'd never imagined her to actually be here now. Actually, Yang Yi didn't know that his sword intent from all those years was at the peak of the lower universe, and countless sword cultivators dreamed of possessing it. He didn't know what that small gift of his represented to the young girl. She smiled, surprised. Ting Yun. She should be called Sword Empress Ting Yun. Perhaps no one here had heard of her name, but in the lower universe it was dazzling like Yang Yi and a Nanjing's names right now. Yang Yi sized up the woman before him and nodded. I'm very surprised. I didn't expect you to have grown to such an extent. She'd comprehended sword intent while she was just a child, and her cultivation hadn't been low. Now, while she was just a major Zen realm expert, her cultivation in the sword Dao was extremely strong, and even Yang Yi couldn't really see through it. Ting Yun smiled and glanced at the surroundings. My strength is limited, so I'll deal with 3 sages. I can't do anything about the rest. Yang Yi shook his head. You don't owe me anything. That's your opinion. She looked him in the eyes. I should naturally repay your kindness. She transformed into a ray of light that shot towards a few sages, and powerful sword intent surged out incessantly, causing others to be unable to look straight at her. They didn't dare to underestimate their opponent. Those sages hurriedly circulated their profound energy and started to resist her attacks. Then let's fight. Sky Maiden transformed into a beam of white light that shot upward. Blood Maiden and Blind Maiden were by her side, and went straight for over a dozen sages. Suddenly, Amon said, Brothers, if we die today, remember to be brothers again in our next life. As soon as she finished speaking, he charged at Sage with her spiked club in hand. Ha ha! Qin Chuan roared with laughter. Big sis man, you're too impatient. Wait for me. He charged over. Meanwhile, Mad Saber gazed at Ling. Both of us fought Big Sis Man in the dead dimension, but we weren't a match for her. But we've never fought. So, let's compete today. Ling replied indifferently. How? Mad Saber smiled. We'll see who can kill a sage first. Ling nodded. All right. He transformed into a ray of white light that shot forward. Meanwhile, Mad Saber drew his saber, and he took it in both hands before charging at the nearest sage. Meanwhile, the monkey howled furiously, and then he slammed his palms down. In an instant, the space in a huge area shook violently, and then the monkey's figure charged forward like a mountain at the sages in the distance. The devil monarch and the others' expressions turned extremely unsightly. They hadn't expected this. While they still had a huge advantage, even if they could defeat Yang Yi and kill him, they would suffer heavy losses, truly severe losses. Not a single opponent they were facing was ordinary. Why had the Alliance of All and the other two paths dispatch all their sages? Because they didn't want to give Yang Yi a chance, and they didn't want to win a Pyrrhic victory against Yang Yi. They hoped to pay the smallest price to annihilate Yang Yi. Yet now, Yang Yi suddenly had so many friends, and this threw a wrench in their plans. However, they had no way back. They had to see this battle to the end. The end was either one where Yang Yi died or they did. The devil monarch's eyes gradually turned icy cold. Kill them! Don't let a single one of them survive. Kill! In an instant, almost 100 sages shot upward. This battle wasn't any inferior to the battle between all the races and the god race all those years ago. Yang Yi gazed at a Nanjing, and the latter nodded slightly. After that, they vanished on the spot, and they were in front of the devil monarch when they appeared again. The latter was terrified when he witnessed this. He didn't fear a one-on-one battle against Yang Yi or a Nanjing. However, he was extremely terrified of a battle against both of them at once. Obviously, they wanted to annihilate him without giving him a chance to survive. The expressions of the sages around the devil monarch changed as well, and they were about to lend him a hand. However, it was too late because Yang Yi and a Nanjing attacked too quickly. The devil monarch was no ordinary expert, so his reaction was extremely quick. At the instant Yang Yi and a Nanjing appeared before him, a strand of terrifying black energy surged out from him, and then a huge tombstone appeared in front of him. Meanwhile, a vicious glow flashed through a Nanjing's eyes. She held Elysium in her right hand as she stabbed it forward, and it stabbed straight into the tombstone. Bang! A terrifying wave of energy rippled forth. The tombstone started to crack open. Meanwhile, a Nanjing stomped her right foot down, and it slammed straight against Elysium's handle. Bang! Elysium cracked apart the entire tombstone. Meanwhile, a ray of sword energy soundlessly appeared behind the devil monarch. The latter was horrified, and he slammed both his palms down. Bang! A terrifying wave of energy rippled out with him at its center. And Nanjing and Yang Yi were blasted away. But at the instant that happened, Elysium suddenly left in Nanjing's grasp while Yang Ye's sword shot forward like a bolt of lightning. Hiss! Hiss! The devil monarch's figure stiffened. Elysium was in his chest, and Yang Ye's sword was in his back. Yang Yi and a Nanjing's joint forces had annihilated the devil monarch. The devil monarch looked at them with a slightly blank gaze in his eyes. Formidable. Bang! The devil monarch's body exploded apart, and then the sword and Elysium flew back to their respective owners. The barbaric king, spirit god, and shaman emperor converged together. At this moment, they truly realized that they were unable to deal with Yang Yi and a Nanjing's joint forces on their own. Their joint forces were truly too terrifying. Yang Yi gazed at a Nanjing. Are you all right? A Nanjing closed her eyes slowly, and a long time passed before she said, I can still fight. Yang Yi cracked a smile. If it wasn't for me, you may become a peerless expert like the unfettered one, but you're very likely to die with me today. She gazed at him. We'll die together. Yang Yi roared with laughter, and it reverberated through the world like a thunderclap. A short while later, Yang Yi transformed into a ray of light that shot upward while a Nanjing followed behind him. At the same time, the barbaric king, spirit god, and Shaman Emperor attacked in unison, while over a dozen top-rate sages remained by their side. In the primordial pagoda, Snowy was absolutely anxious. She was asking the primordial pagoda for help, but it couldn't do anything. It was a divine weapon, but while it was strong, it needed to be in the hands of someone to display that strength. But Yang Yi hadn't been able to fully grasp it. So, if it was made to fight those sages on its own, it could never accomplish that. Unless those sages came inside the pagoda. However, the primordial pagoda had realized the situation Yang Yi was in, and it was madly utilizing primordial violet energy to repair Yang Ye's absolutely damaged body. Besides that, it had realized that it must let Yang Yi take full control of it. Before this, it hadn't given that much thought, and neither had Yang Yi. Yet now, Yang Yi was facing so many formidable enemies, and it made the pagoda feel threatened. It would rise and fall with Yang Yi. When Yang Wudi forcefully placed it within Yang Yi, it had merged into one with Yang Ye's body. So, if Yang Yi died, then even if it survived, it would suffer damages. Snowy grew even more anxious when even the primordial pagoda couldn't help. In the end, she instinctively gazed at Xianxia, who'd been standing silently at the side. Xianxia gazed at Snowy, and then Snowy flew over to her. Snowy embraced Snowy and rubbed Snowy's head gently while she muttered, I can't. I really can't. Axiu can't help. Snowy gazed at her with bewilderment. Xianxia seemed like she'd lost her soul. There are even stronger people. If Axiu helps, Big Brother will die. Even stronger enemies. In the endless black hole in the distance, the glowing door Yang Yi found the other day was trembling slightly. A long time passed before a phantom walked out slowly from the other side. The phantom glanced at the surroundings, and his gaze passed through space and swept through the entire large universe. A long time passed before the phantom said, compared to the void spirit race of all those years ago, the living beings of the large universe are truly weak now. The phantom's voice turned quite ferocious at this point. Void spirit maiden, you sacrificed yourself and the living beings of the large universe to seriously injure me, forcing my undying race to retreat from this large universe and fall into deep sleep for hundreds of thousands of years. Now, can anyone in this large universe stop my undying race? Ha ha ha. The phantom's laughter was filled with madness. The undying race had endured this grievance for hundreds of thousands of years. The battle was still going on. At this moment, the battle between the two sides had entered its peak. Death. People were dying one after the other. This included sages from the alliance of All Side and Yang Ye's side. Bang! An explosion resounded, and a figure was blasted far away. Yang Yi glanced at it, and he felt like needless were stabbing into his heart. It was none other than Qin Chuan. Qin Chuan suddenly gazed at Yang Yi while his figure flew, and then he cracked a smile. Brother Yang. Let's be brothers again in our next lives. I'm leaving first. As soon as he finished speaking, his profound energy surged out madly, and then his body instantly expanded. Boom! Qin Chuan's body exploded apart, and a terrifying wave of energy swept out. It instantly slammed against the sage before him and obliterated that sage. Self-detonation. He'd taken his opponent down with him. Yang Yi closed his eyes slowly. Meanwhile, Mad Saber's loud laughter resounded. Ha! Ling, I killed a sage first. Haha, you've lost. Let's compete again in our next life. As soon as he finished speaking, his figure suddenly stiffened, and then his figure started falling slowly. Ling glanced at Mad Saber's falling body, and then he wiped off the blood on the corner of his mouth. Slow down! I'm coming. As soon as he finished speaking, his figure suddenly shook violently. In an instant, countless strands of spirit energy converged toward him, and his own spirit energy started to rise madly. Countless strands of spirit energy converged within him. Bang! Ling's body exploded abruptly, and a terrifying storm of spirit energy erupted like a volcano. Two sages in front of him were blasted away. One of them was even blasted into bits, while the other was heavily injured and lost the ability to continue fighting. However, Ling was gone from this world. Forever. Meanwhile, Yu Jing's voice resounded. Bastards! You actually left so quickly. He gazed at Yang Yi and Aman, and he continued, Brother Yang, sister man, if my corpse remains intact, then don't forget to get me a clean set of clothes. I don't want to die covered in dirt like those bastards. Ha ha! As he roared with laughter, Yu Jing charged off into the distance. Yang Yi closed his eyes slowly while tears ceaselessly seeped out from the corners of his eyes. Meanwhile, Nanjing was fighting many sages in the distance. Bang! Suddenly, a loud explosion resounded, and then a colossus flew off into the distance. It was the monkey. At this moment, the monkey had lost his right arm, and his body was covered in injuries that were bleeding incessantly. He seemed like he was wearing blood-red clothes. After he stopped himself, he gazed at Yang Yi and said, I'll leave my spirit ape clan to you, brother. As soon as he said that, the monkey roared with fury, and then he grabbed the golden rod with his left hand and shot forward. Self-ignition. Flames were burning all around the monkey. He'd ignited himself. At this moment, the monkey's aura was unprecedentedly powerful, and it was on the verge of being on par with progenitors. As for the golden rod in his grasp, it had transformed into flames because it had been fully burned. Self-destruction. Finally, the monkey arrived before the sages. Boom! A rumbling explosion resounded through the battlefield, and almost 17 sages in that area were instantly obliterated, annihilated without a trace. 17 sages had been obliterated without being able to fight back. The monkey was dead as well. It was an attack he'd ignited and burned up himself to fuel. Yang Yi slowly clenched his fists, and his nails sunk into his palm, causing blood to cover Yang Ye's hand. World Eye! Suddenly, a furious shout resounded. Blind Maiden suddenly opened her eyes far away. In an instant, 2 rays of blood-red light shot forward. Everywhere they passed, everything was obliterated, and 2 sages were instantly burned into ashes. However, 2 strings of blood red seeped out from Blind Maiden's eyes. 2 breaths of time later, she turned to the side and looked downward. The grave by the ocean. Blood Maiden slowly stretched out her right hand. I told you I'd come keep you company. As soon as she finished speaking, she closed her eyes slowly, and no signs of life were left in her. Third sister. Meanwhile, Nether Maiden howled with fury. In an instant, a chain shot forward, and it shot through the head of a sage in front of her. Meanwhile, she was blasted away by another sage. An old man was watching the battle in silence from afar. Zhong Yi from the weapon path was by his side. This time, Zhong Yi didn't participate, or it should be said that he'd left the weapon path. He'd wanted to leave when the slaughter line had been slaughtered all those years ago, but he wanted to rebuild the slaughter line. So he hadn't left yet. But now, when the weapon path acted against Yang Yi, he was truly and completely disappointed. The old man said, It's horrible. Zhong Yi gazed at the old man. Senior, are you not going to interfere? The old man shook his head. I won't be able to save him even if I do. Why? Zhong Yi was puzzled. The alliance of all and the other 2 paths have suffered tremendous losses. If you act now, you'll definitely... It won't work. The old man looked off into the distance. Don't forget about the god race. The god race. Zhong Yi was shocked. The old man nodded. Zhong Ye's face was covered in shock. Meanwhile, Nanjing suddenly stopped in front of Yang Yi, and then she turned around to look at him. I don't think I can hold on any longer. Blood seeped out from the corner of her mouth once she finished speaking. At the same time, Yang Yi opened his eyes and gazed at her. At this moment, her right hand was in pieces, and it was because she'd overused her strength. She'd fought over a dozen sages on her own, and some of them were even halfway into the progenitor realm. So, while being able to accomplish this couldn't be described as unprecedented and impossible to replicate, she wasn't inferior to any genius in the history of this large universe. And Nanjing stopped, so the sages in front of her stopped as well. She was too terrifying, and she made them feel a huge amount of pressure. So, now that she'd stopped, they had no intention to follow up with more attacks. They didn't have any intention to do that at all. That was how strong Nanjing was. Yang Yi walked over to her, touched her face lightly with his right hand while he felt like needles were piercing his heart. Farewell. When she said that to him, she was actually saying her farewells. Yang Yi suddenly started laughing, but his smile was quite miserable, and his laughter grew louder and louder until it filled the surroundings. A moment later, Yang Ye's face gradually became ferocious. Suddenly, Yang Yi lifted his fingers and stabbed his eyes with them. 2 strings of blood sprayed from them. Bang! A wave of terrifying slaughter intent swept out from within him, and it surged madly like a rising tide. Ha ha ha! Yang Yi roared madly with laughter. Hate! I'm so full of hate. I, Yang Yi, am so full of hate. Ha ha! His slaughter intent rose madly. In an instant, the surroundings turned blood red, and everyone felt like they were in an ocean of blood. At this moment, everyone looked toward Yang Yi. Amidst his roaring and insane laughter, Yang Ye's slaughter intent increased madly. At the same time, countless strands of blood converged incessantly toward Yang Yi from the surroundings. It wasn't just the surroundings. Anywhere that blood existed in the large universe, the blood there seemed like it was summoned by something and shot up into the air before traveling through space to converge at Yang Ye's position. It wasn't just blood. The slaughter intent emanated by anyone in every corner of the large universe suddenly vanished. It hadn't really vanished, but all of it had traveled through space and converged at Yang Ye's position. Blood and slaughter intent were ceaselessly converging to Yang Yi. Slaughter intent. The spirit god spoke with astonishment. This slaughter intent? He seemed to have thought of something, and his eyes opened wide. This is bad. His slaughter intent is about to attain the progenitor realm. Stop him. The progenitor realm in slaughter intent. All the sages here were horrified. Once Yang Yi accomplished that, it would definitely be a disaster for them, a true disaster. After all, it was very, very difficult for them to deal with Yang Yi even now. So, if he attained the progenitor realm of slaughter intent, then, just thinking about it was terrifying. They didn't hesitate to abandon their opponents and charge at Yang Yi. All of them charged at Yang Yi. They had to stop him from succeeding. It was what the spirit god and all the others were thinking right now. Stop them. Suddenly, someone shouted these words. An instant later, Nanjing was the first to charge over while Blood Maiden and the others were behind her. However, at this moment the spirit god and the others were desperate too. They were very well aware that if Yang Yi succeeded, then they wouldn't be able to avoid a disaster. Even if they died, they had to stop Yang Yi. When the spirit god and the others truly started risking their lives, the battle grew absolutely intense. Around 15 minutes later, Elysium suddenly shot out from Nanjing's grasp. Hiss! It stabbed into a sage's chest, causing that sage's body to explode apart. Elysium flew back into her grasp. She used Elysium to support her body that was almost falling to pieces, and then glanced at Yang Yi. I really can't go on anymore. I can't stay by your side anymore. As soon as she finished speaking, Nanjing's eyes gradually closed. Exhausted, Nanjing was tired. She was truly, truly tired. Since the battle began, she was the most tired of them all. Now she really couldn't go on any longer. Right when Nanjing's eyes were about to close completely, a pair of hands suddenly held her face. She used all her strength to open her eyes, and she saw Yang Yi before her. At this moment, Yang Yi was completely crimson red, and his eyes were no more. Her heart hurt when she saw him like this. Meanwhile, Yang Yi suddenly said, "Stay by my side." As soon as he finished speaking, he transported her into the primordial pagoda. Once she entered the primordial pagoda immediately started sending countless strands of primordial violet energy into her, while Snowy ceaselessly sent torrents of spirit energy to her. However, Nanjing's aura was still growing weaker and weaker. Snowy was so anxious she couldn't stop crying. Suddenly, Xianxia squatted by Nanjing's side. Nanjing gazed at her. I'm afraid I really won't be able to hold on. Help him in the future. All right? Xianxia gazed at her in silence. Nanjing spoke softly. He's a good person. A good person. Was Yang Yi a good person? It depended on the individual person. As far as a Nanjing was concerned, Yang Yi was a good person. When a million arrows were raining down upon her, it was Yang Yi who'd used his body to stop them for her. Since that moment, the image of a person was etched in her heart. She was willing to fight the entire world for him. And Nanjing's eyes started to close slowly. Suddenly, Tianxiu grabbed her hand. In an instant, a strand of boundless mysterious energy surged into a Nanjing. Voice spirit energy. The Tao progenitor had told Yang Yi that when the universe was born, there had been 3 types of energy: primordial violet energy, natural energy, and chaos energy. Actually, there was one more: void spirit energy. Void spirit energy was superior to all 3 energies, and it was eternal and indestructible. However, and Nanjing's eyes still closed in the end. Snowy was stunned, and then she started crying more. Meanwhile, Tianxiu rubbed Snowy's little head. "She's just sleeping." "Sleeping?" Snowy gazed at Tianxiu, and then Tianxiu nodded to guarantee it. However, Snowy was still crying. She started waving her claws and was asking if she was really useless. Tianxiu rubbed Snowy's head. "Don't think too much about it. Big brother will be fine. Don't do anything stupid too. All right? Don't do anything stupid." Snowy's thoughts were very pure and simple. She felt that if she left with the spirit gods group, then they would spare Yang Yi, and she was prepared to do that. Tianxiu had realized that, and that was why she'd said that. The conflict between Yang Yi and the Alliance of All was the Sprite Lord, but it was just the Sprite Lord anymore. They would never let Yang Yi live. He was a threat. He was a true threat to them. As for Snowy, to be a little frank, the world within the primordial pagoda would be dead without Snowy in it. No matter how monstrous the primordial pagoda was, it couldn't create spirit energy on its own. The reason the primordial pagoda loved Snowy so much was mainly because it would have an endless supply of spirit energy while Snowy was here. Snowy was the most useful, and she just couldn't fight. Tianxiu consoled Snowy, and then she looked up. Her gaze was extremely icy cold. But it only took a moment for bewilderment to fill her eyes. But then it turned icy cold again. Just like that, her gaze kept changing. Outside the primordial pagoda, everyone here had stopped, and they were looking at Yang Yi. At this moment, there was no slaughter intent or blood around Yang Yi. However, he seemed like he was made of blood itself. At this moment, he felt dangerous to them just by standing there. Extremely dangerous. "Retreat!" Suddenly, a voice resounded in the spirit god's mind. It was the weapon progenitor's voice. "Retreat?" The spirit god looked up at the sky. "Why?" A short while passed before an extremely unsightly expression appeared on his face. It wasn't that the 5 progenitors refused to help, they couldn't. They were heavily injured. The 5 progenitors had attacked Yang Wudi together, but they hadn't just suffered light injuries from the battle. They'd been severely injured. Or to be more precise, Yang Wudi had almost taken all of them with him. Even they had never expected that jointly attacking Yang Wudi would end in such a way. Yang Wudi's strength far surpassed their expectations. Besides that, they'd never expected people to come help Yang Yi while he was in such a situation, and they were shocked to witness Yang Yi actually attain the progenitor realm in slaughter intent at this moment. "Retreat." The progenitors decisively decided to retreat. The spirit god glanced at the surroundings. No more than 60 of the sages on his side remained, and most of them were heavily injured. They'd suffered severe losses. Truly severe losses. The spirit god took a deep breath and said, "Let's go." As soon as he gave the order, all the sages intended to leave. However, Yang Yi suddenly said, "You're leaving." As soon as he finished speaking, a ray of blood-red sword energy flashed. Hiss! The head of a sage by the spirit god's side flew up into the air. He hadn't been able to fight back at all. The spirit god was astounded because Yang Yi was actually that strong. "Attack!" As soon as he gave the order, the spirit god raised both his hands. In an instant, countless strands of spirit energy converged together. In an instant, strands of spirit energy swept out toward Yang Yi like bolts of lightning. Suddenly, Yang Yi raised his hand and swung his sword. Hiss! The spirit energy was instantly obliterated. The spirit god and the other sages' expressions instantly turned extremely unsightly from the sight of this. At this moment, Xianxia's strength had undergone a qualitative transformation when compared to the past. Xianxia's current strength was much, much stronger than it had been. The spirit god and the others had the desire to retreat now. They wanted to avoid him for now, but how could Xianxia possibly let them retreat? Suddenly, Xianxia raised his right foot and pressed it down lightly. Hiss! The space beneath his feet was instantly obliterated, and then a ray of blood-red light shot forward. It was extremely swift and instantly entered the group of sages before him. In an instant, they were enveloped by monstrous slaughter intent. At this moment, the spirit god had a ferocious expression on his face. He knew that it was impossible to retreat now, because retreating now would be no different than killing the sages behind him. Fight! The spirit god waved his hands. In an instant, countless strands of spirit energy converged madly to him, and the barbaric king and shaman emperor beside him acted as well. At this moment, only the three of them could keep Xianxia busy, so they had to step forward. Otherwise, the other sages wouldn't be able to resist a single attack from Xianxia. After he attained the progenitor realm in slaughter intent, ordinary sages were nothing before Xianxia. In the past, he had to use his full strength to kill a sage in an instant, yet now just a casual swing of his sword could accomplish that. Xianxia slaughtered the other sages while he fought against the spirit god's group of three. Hiss! 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 A strange scene appeared here on the battlefield. Ray after ray of sword energy flashed incessantly, and every single one of them would make a head fly. In just less than 15 minutes, Xianxia had slaughtered 9 sages on his own. The spirit god and the others were truly in panic at this point, because they were incapable of keeping Xianxia tied down anymore. However, they could discern that Xianxia was almost completely exhausted, and he was just holding on with his last breath. So long as that passed, Xianxia would die. Kill! The spirit god suddenly howled with fury. In an instant, a terrifying wave of energy swept out from within him and slammed against Xianxia. However, Xianxia raised his hand and destroyed it with a swing of his sword. At the same time, Xianxia's sword transformed into a ray of light that shot forward. Hiss! The head of a sage standing over 1 kilometer away flew up into the air. Exhaust him to death! Suddenly, the barbaric king howled with fury, and then a huge hammer slammed down at Xianxia. The force it carried obliterated the space around Xianxia, and it pushed Xianxia backward repeatedly. However, Xianxia was merely pushed backward, because a strand of blood-red slaughter intent was in front of Xianxia, and it was blocking off the force of the attack. That strand of slaughter intent had blocked an attack that carried the barbaric king's full strength. As soon as Xianxia stopped himself, a few dozen sages surrounded him. Boundary Maiden and the others were about to lend him a hand, but Xianxia had already attacked. Countless sword howls resounded throughout the surroundings, and then countless rays of blood-red sword energy surged out from Xianxia like a storm and rained down upon the sages around him. The sword energy was still the same as before, but it was covered in slaughter intent, and it had become extremely terrifying because of that slaughter intent. Progenitor realm slaughter intent. Slaughter intent that had attained the progenitor realm by converging the slaughter intent and blood throughout the large universe. Such slaughter intent wasn't something an ordinary person could resist. The spirit god and the others turned pale when they saw the slaughter intent. Suddenly, a ray of holy light appeared before them, and it completely blocked off Xianxia's blood-red sword energy. Meanwhile, another ray of sword energy suddenly struck the holy light. Boom! The light exploded apart. However, a progenitor had appeared before the spirit god's group. It was the Buddhist progenitor. However, it wasn't his main body, and it was just a phantom. At this moment, he didn't dare to reveal his main body. If he showed himself after being heavily injured by Xianxia, then Xianxia's current strength combined with some others who were hiding in the shadows would be entirely sufficient to kill him. The Buddhist progenitor gazed at Xianxia. If you continue, everyone by your side will die. Xianxia closed his eyes slowly. If he continued fighting, what about the others by his side who were still alive? Were they supposed to die along with him? Yang Yi took a deep breath and swung his sword. Bang! The Buddhist progenitor's figure was instantly obliterated. Fuck off! Yang Yi glanced coldly at the spirit gods group. They glanced at him and left. Far away in the distance, the Buddhist progenitor's main body pressed his palms together. God race, you've won. Meanwhile, once the spirit gods group left, a woman in a white dress suddenly appeared near Yang Yi. It was Ding Xiaoyao. At the same time, around 25 sages surrounded Nether Maiden and the others. Ding Xiaoyao looked Yang Yi in the eyes. All of you are completely exhausted, and you have no chance if you resist. Hand over the Sprite Lord, and everyone by your side can live. What she meant was that Yang Yi had to die. Yang Yi was about to speak when Snowy suddenly left the primordial pagoda. She gazed at Yang Yi, cracked a smile, and then waved her little paw. After that, she flew over to Ding Xiaoyao and placed her claw against her throat. Let Yang Yi go or she would take her own life. Snowy may be naive and pure, but she was no fool. She knew the state Yang Yi was in. Yang Yi and the others didn't have the strength to fight the god race too, and she was the only one who could save him. Only she could force the god race to make a compromise. She was the most important being in the large universe, and everything the god race did would become meaningless if she died. Ding Xiaoyao gazed at Snowy for a long time, and then she said, "All right, I'll do it." Snowy lowered her claw and gazed at Yang Yi. While Yang Yi had lost his eyes, his heart wasn't blind. He stretched out his hand with the desire to grab Snowy, but his hand soundlessly dropped down as soon as he raised it just a little. And Nanjing wasn't the only one who was exhausted. He was exhausted too. At this moment, he didn't have any strength left in him. Snowy flew over to Xianxia's ear, rubbed his ear lightly with her face, and then flew over to Ding Xiaoyao. Ding Xiaoyao took Snowy with her and was about to leave when Yang Yi suddenly said, "Xiaoyao." Ding Xiaoyao stopped and closed her eyes slowly. "I'll repay you for what I owe you. I definitely will. Don't harm her." Meanwhile, Yang Yi said, "If anything happens to her, then I'll annihilate your god race, including you." Ding Xiaoyao glanced at Yang Yi, and then she vanished into the distance with Snowy. The surroundings fell silent. Only a few were left on Yang Ye's side. Among the 11 from the Nether Pavilion, Bling Maiden was gone. Sky Maiden and Blood Maiden were heavily injured. As for Yu Jing, Qin Chuan, Mad Saber, Ling, and the monkey, so many were gone. Suddenly, Yang Yi started walking slowly and walked over to Amon. At this moment, Amon was lying in space, and she was so weak that she seemed like she would die at any moment. Yang Yi placed his right hand on her and his primordial violet energy surged madly into her. Amon gazed at Yang Yi while tears soundlessly flowed down from her eyes. "They're gone, all gone." Yang Yi didn't say a word. 2 streams of blood red just seeped out from his eye sockets. A short while later, Yang Yi stood up slowly. He went 300 m to the right, and he saw a corpse floating there. It wasn't whole anymore, and it was in a terrifying state. Yu Jing. It belonged to Yu Jing. Yang Yi walked over to the corpse, took out a clean white robe, and covered Yu Jing's corpse. His hands were trembling as he did it. Yang Yi patted Yu Jing's shoulders lightly and spoke in a trembling voice. "We'll be brothers again in our next life." He went around Yu Jing to the other side, and a golden rod was floating there. But it was just an afterimage, it was just a shadow of it that remained. The monkey. He was gone. He didn't even leave a corpse behind. Yang Yi spoke softly. "Brother Monkey, you and I met by chance, yet we became friends. It is I who have wronged you. I can only repay you for this in your next life." As soon as he finished speaking, he waved his right hand lightly, and the golden rod's image vanished silently. Yang Yi turned around and went over to Blood Maiden's group. There was a corpse in front of them. Blind Maiden. Their third sister. The third sister he'd met in Dark Hell Continent. The third sister who didn't like to speak. Yang Yi knelt down slowly. At this moment he cried like a child. Dead. She was truly dead. Sky Maiden shook her head slightly. Third sister wanted to go accompany him for a long time. She was naturally talking about Blind Maiden's childhood sweetheart. Yang Yi shook his head with force, and his body trembled incessantly. The surroundings were silent. 2 hours later, Yang Yi brought them all into the primordial pagoda, and then number graves appeared in a bamboo forest within the pagoda. They were the graves, Qin Chuan, Blind Maiden, Mad Saber, and the others. Yang Yi just knelt before those graves without moving. Zier and Tianxiu were by his side. Tianxiu's face was emotionless, and her hands were clenched tightly. Zier's eyes were filled with pain. She was in pain because Yang Yi was in pain. She'd never seen Yang Yi act like this. All of them had died for Yang Yi, and she truly couldn't imagine what Yang Yi was feeling right now. Just like that, Yang Yi knelt there for 3 days and nights. On the 4th day, Yang Yi stood up slowly. As he gazed at the graves, he said, "Third sister, brother monkey, Yu Jing, Qin Chuan, all of your deaths won't be for nothing." He turned around and left. At the 2nd level of the primordial pagoda, on the bed which Zier used to be using, and Nanjing was there. And Nanjing, the woman who'd almost died in battle for him. And Nanjing laid there quietly, and Zier, Tianxiu, and Little Sky were by her side. Little Sky spoke softly. "She's just in deep sleep. She'll wake up once the primordial violet energy repairs her internal injuries." Little Sky glanced at Tianxiu, who had an icy cold expression on her face, and continued, "Axiu, it was you who saved her. How did you do it?" Little Sky was really curious about that, because even primordial violet energy couldn't save Nanjing from the injuries she'd suffered. But Tianxiu had forcefully pulled her back from the edge of death. Tianxiu lowered her head slightly and remained silent. And Nanjing was fine. Yang Yi took in Nanjing's hand. He knew that he really owed her too much. Too much. Meanwhile, Tianxiu grabbed Yang Ye's arm and spoke softly, "Big brother, Snowy will be all right, right?" Yang Yi gazed at Tianxiu, and tears had started to seep out from her eyes. She just gazed at Yang Yi. I could have stopped Snowy from leaving. But I couldn't. There are stronger people, and both you and Snowy will die if I do anything now. I don't want you to die. I really don't." Yang Yi rubbed her head. "Snowy will be fine. I'll go get her soon." He paused for a moment and continued, "You mentioned stronger people. Who is that?" Tianxiu shook her head. "They are very powerful. My clansmen were killed by them. I can sense them, and many will die." Yang Yi embraced her and spoke softly, "Don't be afraid. It'll be fine. Don't be afraid." Tianxiu hugged him tight. Her gaze was icy cold and without a shred of emotion. Suddenly, Yang Lianshuang appeared by Yang Ye's side. He looked at her and she passed a rock to him. "A senior asked me to give it to you." Yang Yi asked, "What is this?" She gazed at him. "I'll tell you once you finish viewing it." As soon as she finished speaking, she gazed at Tianxiu, Zier, and Little Sky. "Let's leave for now." Zier and Little Sky exchanged glances, and then they nodded and left with Tianxiu. Only Yang Yi remained on the 2nd floor. Yang Yi circulated his profound energy, and a strand of it surged into the rock. A moment later, a ray of white light flashed out of it, and then a middle-aged man appeared in front of Yang Yi. The armless man. It was the armless man, Yang Wudi. Yang Wudi gazed at Yang Yi. "Kid, when you see this projection of me, it proves that I'm dead. You're no fool, so you should know who I am." He paused for a moment and continued, "All those years ago, I had to leave and become entangled with that person in order to turn your destiny around. That departure went on for years. No matter what my reason was, I'm still not a good father or husband. It's an undeniable fact. Especially to your mother, I owe her too much indeed. Because even until death, she still didn't know who I am, and she didn't know anything about all those things that are plaguing you. Of course, I never planned to tell her. I can just take care of it on my own." "Ha ha!" Yang Yi remained silent. Meanwhile, Yang Wudi continued, "When Profounder Continent was destroyed, I couldn't do anything. All I could do was help you a little and bring you to a new plane. However, I couldn't help you too much. You have to tread on your own path. You did well and made it all the way. Now, all I can do is heavily injure those old fellows for you, and make them incapable of acting against you. However, it will only stop them for a while. As for the future, you'll have to face it yourself. He suddenly flew over to Yang Yi at this point and rubbed Yang Ye's head gently. The happiest moment in my entire life was meeting your mother. She was a simple girl, and she was the love of my life. As for you, kid, I like you too. From now on, both your mother and I won't be by your side, and you'll have to take care of the rest. His figure gradually turned ethereal. At the instant he vanished, he stared at Yang Yi with a gaze that was unprecedentedly gentle. Meanwhile, Yang Lianshuang walked in. The 5 progenitors didn't show themselves because he heavily injured them. However, he paid with his life. Moreover, he was the reason why the Buddhist progenitor and the other progenitors didn't act against you in the past. Yang Yi closed his eyes slowly. Is he really dead? Yang Lianshuang nodded. He was injured before he fought the 5 progenitors, and he ignited his lifespan during the battle with them. He paid that price to heavily injure them before dying, and that was why those 5 progenitors didn't show themselves before you. Yang Yi closed his eyes, and a long time passed before he took a deep breath. Father, I'll make them pay for everything they owe us. I'll make them pay 100-fold. Yang Yi arrived in outer space, and the body of a middle-aged man was floating there. It was Yang Wudi's body. There were 3 rays of sword energy coiled around him, causing all things to be kept away. Yang Yi knelt down slowly and just knelt there. After that battle, the entire situation in the large universe had become bleak. Regardless of whether it was the alliance of all or Yang Ye's side, both had suffered severe losses. Especially the alliance of all, its losses had truly harmed its foundation, and it would take at least 1,000 years for the alliance of all to recover from their losses. As for Yang Ye's side, he'd suffered severe losses. In short, the God race was the true winner. The alliance of all and the 2 paths had taken precautions against the God race, and they were prepared to deal with the God race after Yang Yi. As far as they were concerned, they could deal with Yang Yi swiftly, and then deal with the God race. However, they'd underestimated Yang Wudi and Yang Ye's strengths. So not only had they failed to deal with Yang Yi swiftly, they'd been crippled by him instead. So, the God race was able to reap the final benefits. As for the human race had quite complicated emotions when they heard that Yang Yi was still alive. Obviously, some hoped that Yang Yi would die in the battle. The human race couldn't have been considered to have betrayed Yang Yi, but it could be described as being extremely disloyal. It had abandoned its king for its survival. It had abandoned Yang Yi. It would be fine if Yang Yi died in battle. But Yang Yi just happened to have survived. So how would they face him? Of course, even more were wondering what the human race would do if Yang Yi sought revenge. Yang Yi didn't take revenge. But Yang Lianshuang and her subordinates, who had quite a prominent position in the human race, and even the experts of the Spirit Ape clan, had left without making a sound. At this moment, the hearts of all the human sages were heavy. They had no leader, so they'd lost their backbone, and when they tried to select a new leader, they realized that no one was suitable for the task. Who could take up such a responsibility? No one. While the war had stopped, the battles hadn't. Regardless of whether it was the alliance of all or 3 paths, all of them faced an issue. The end times. Spirit energy had vanished and escalated the conflict between the races. At this moment, all the races were in chaos. Especially races like the demon race, which had no leader, they were in utter chaos. The demon god had perished in battle, so the demon race had instantly been split apart. Former allies in battle were sworn enemies now, and the clans in the demon race started to fight each other for spirit energy and natural treasures. It wasn't just the demon race, the other races were in a similar situation. The human race. The human dimension was in utter chaos right now. While Yang Yi was still here, he'd used brutal methods to suppress many powers and instilled fear in them to dare not cause trouble. However, once Yang Yi left, and coupled with the rapid disappearance of spirit energy throughout the world, the organizations in the human dimension couldn't be bothered about anything else. They started to fight and seize spirit energy and spirit veins. Presently, all the prefectures in the human dimension were in chaos. They were even willing to kill family for spirit energy. Nature's sacred ground was helpless against this. It was impossible to stop. The entire human dimension was covered in battle. Cities started to empty out, and countless suffered horrible deaths. The worst was the sky race. The sovereign of sky himself wasn't really strong enough, so he couldn't suppress all the organizations in the sky dimensions. So, besides Sky City, his own base of operations, the rest of the sky dimension was in chaos. Slaughter and plundering. It wasn't just the sky race. The entire large universe was suffering the same fate. The end of the world. The end times hadn't truly arrived, but the end of the world had appeared in advance. Xianxia was still kneeling in that expanse of space. Father. It was a word that was extremely unfamiliar to him. When his mother died, he hated that word to the bone. Yet now, the middle-aged man before him and used his life to severely injure 5 progenitors for him. The middle-aged man didn't owe him anything, and it was he who owed the middle-aged man. A long time passed before Xianxia stood up slowly. I'm sure you've been tired after so many years. Rest well and just leave the rest to me. I'll make all of them pay for what they owe us. Xianxia turned around and left. Void Spirit Continent. Xianxia led the others here. It was once the Void Spirit race's territory. Yet now it was just an expanse of ruins, and the spirit energy here had ceased to exist. Even a mouse wouldn't be willing to live on this planet now. There were no signs of life here at all. Xianxia brought them to the hall which Nanjing and him had cultivated in previously. Xianxia spoke softly, and Nanjing and I cultivated here. Cultivating here is especially effective. You can give it a try. Cultivate. Regardless of whether it was Xianxia, Nether Maiden, or the others, they all needed to cultivate and grow stronger. Nether Maiden and the others nodded, and then they entered the hall. They were quite unaccustomed to it in the beginning, but they were no ordinary people, so it didn't take long for them to get used to cultivating in such high gravity. Xianxia turned around and walked away. Suddenly, Tingyun followed him and asked, "Where are you going?" Xianxia stopped. "Just cultivate well." Meanwhile, she appeared in front of Xianxia. "You want to take revenge?" Xianxia fell silent. Tingyun said, "Listen to me. It isn't the time. While your strength has grown tremendously, don't forget that the Alliance of All still has the backing of 5 progenitors. Those progenitors may be heavily injured, but it doesn't represent that they don't have the strength to fight. If you go now, they'll risk their lives in battle against you." Xianxia spoke softly. "Don't worry, I won't act rashly." He vanished on the spot once he finished speaking. Tingyun wanted to chase after him, but Yang Lianshuang said, "There's no need to chase after him." Tingyun gazed at Yang Lianshuang. "Aren't you going to persuade him?" Yang Lianshuang shook her head. "It won't make a difference. Don't worry, he won't let himself die. At the very least, he won't choose to die until he has annihilated the Alliance of All and those 5 progenitors." Situ Tingyun fell silent for a moment and said, "I didn't expect it to develop to this state." Yang Lianshuang said, "Don't think too much about it. Go cultivate. All of us need to grow stronger. Perhaps the war has only just begun." Situ Tingyun looked at her with a puzzled gaze in her eyes. But Yang Lianshuang didn't say anything and just left. She had too many things to do, like making arrangements for the Spirit Ape clan and her subordinates. They may not be strong, but they were her people. Moreover, she needed them to grasp the movements of the other races at all times. Xianxia left Void Spirit Continent and went to the god battlefield. Snowy. He had naturally not forgotten Snowy. However, at this moment, the underground area there was completely deserted. There was no sign of the god race. Xianxia fell silent before the city. The god race. This race which had once been quite close to him. Yet now it was an enemy of his interests. Xianxia laughed with self-ridicule and left. As soon as he emerged on the surface, he met a middle-aged man. It was none other than Lin Jin from the human dimension. Xianxia asked, "Do you need something?" Lin Jin glanced at Xianxia, hesitated for a moment, and said, "The human race is in chaos. The organizations throughout the 5 prefectures have started to fight and seize spirit energy. They've gone mad for the sake of spirit energy and spirit veins. Besides that, conflict has started to arise in nature's sacred ground, and it's all because of spirit energy. In short, The human race is in utter chaos. Yang Yi replied indifferently, and a wisp of bitterness appeared on the corners of Lin Zhen's mouth. Young brother Yang, we know that what we did was bad. We hope you'll be magnanimous and forgive us for that, and come back to take control of the human race once more and lead it out of this hopeless situation. I beg you on behalf of the human race. Lin Zhen bowed to Yang Yi as he spoke. They wanted Yang Yi back. It wasn't his own decision but the decision of all the human sages. Because Yang Yi was the only one capable of convincing everyone to obey him, and only he had the strength to suppress the human race. At the same time, the human race only had hope under Yang Ye's leadership. The human race didn't need a benevolent leader now. What it did need was someone who could fight and deter their enemies and the people in their own race. Yang Yi conformed to that requirement completely. Return to the human race. Yang Yi shook his head. I have no more ties with the human race, and its future has nothing to do with me. Yang Yi turned around and walked away. Suddenly, Lin Zhen obstructed Yang Ye's path and laughed bitterly. Young brother Yang, the human race is really at its most dangerous moment. If no one steps forward, then the human race will probably destroy itself before the end times even arrive. Now, only you can save us, and only you can reunite the entire human race. So, please consider the overall situation of our entire race and return to the human race. I'm not interested. Yang Yi turned around and walked away. Suddenly, Lin Zhen's expression changed drastically, and then he chased up to Yang Yi again. Young brother Yang, I just received news that the Alliance of All launched a surprise attack against us, and they plan to seize our human race's spirit energy. So please. Suddenly, Yang Yi turned around to look at him. What was the human race doing when I fought the Alliance of All? What was the human race doing when my brothers fell one by one? The human race did nothing. Yet now that it's in trouble, you want my help? All right, make all of them come back to life and I'll save the human race. Go on. Make them come back to life. Yang Yi was practically howling as he finished speaking. The monkey, Qin Chuan, Yu Jing, Mad Saber, Ling, all of them had stepped forward when Yang Yi was in trouble, and they fought to their death. But what was the human race doing then? They were just watching from the sidelines. Since the human race couldn't suffer with him, then why should he suffer with them? They could just deal with their own problems. As soon as Yang Yi finished speaking, Yang Yi transformed into a ray of light that vanished into the sky. Only Lin Zhen remained here. Lin Zhen had a bitter expression on his face. Actually, he hadn't had much hope when he came this time. He'd suggested that the sages of the human race take Yang Ye's side and make a risky bet when the Alliance of All wanted to annihilate Yang Yi. However, they weren't willing to make that bet. Because based on the circumstances at the time, Yang Yi really had no chance. Not even the slightest chance. Over 100 sages. How terrifying was such a force? But what about Yang Yi? He just had a Nanjing and the monkey. At that time, if the human race took Yang Ye's side, it would be no different than giving their lives away. Since there was no hope, they would definitely not choose to take Yang Ye's side. Thus, they let Yang Yi on his own, and they made Yang Yi have no choice but to leave the human race and draw the line between him and the human race. They succeeded. However, the outcome far surpassed their expectations. Yang Yi survived, and his strength had grown tremendously. At a time like this, they wanted Yang Yi to go back. Were they idiots? Of course not, they had their own pride. However, was it more important than their lives? Was it more important than the human race's future? Of course not. The human race was in chaos, utter chaos. If no one stepped forward, it was very likely to be erased from history. So, they held on to that last bit of hope, and they hoped that the so-called desire to do right by the human race would make Yang Yi return. Unfortunately, Yang Yi wasn't someone like that. As far as he was concerned, if the human race stayed by his side no matter the situation, then he would do the same. He would be willing to lose his life for the human race. Sadly, the human race had chosen to abandon him. Yang Yi left. In his heart, only revenge and getting Snowy back remained. As for the human race, he'd never given it any thought. Lin Zhen shook his head and left. The human dimension. Countless experts from the Alliance of All had entered the human dimension. As for their goal, it was simple, it was to plunder the human race. When their internal conflict couldn't be solved, they decided to move the conflict and let their experts plunder other races. In that way, they could move the conflict away and make those experts become united again. But where to plunder? The first target that came to mind was the human race. The human race had Xianxia in the past, so they didn't dare to step foot in there. However, Xianxia wasn't the king of the human race anymore. So, as far as they were concerned, the human race was a sheep waiting to be slaughtered. It was doomsday for the human race. Countless sages and experts surged into the human dimension. Plunder and kill. While the human race had over a dozen sages, they couldn't resist the joint forces of the Alliance of All. At this moment, the human dimension was truly hell on earth. Xianxia returned to Void Spirit Continent. Nether Maiden and the others were all cultivating. Xianxia entered the primordial pagoda. There was a shattered sword and a sword covered in damages before him. It was Judgment and the sword precursor. While his heart was one with the sword precursor, her quality was too low. So, she'd been heavily damaged in the previous battle. Fortunately, both Judgment and the sword precursor spirits were still here. Xianxia brought them to the pill furnace, and then he placed the sword precursor in it. At the same time, a strand of terrifying slaughter intent and sword intent surged into the furnace. You? The divine flame was shocked. Why, your slaughter intent is too strong. If you use it to forge the sword, it will become a true sword of slaughter. Are you sure? Xianxia replied, the sword is what the master is. Since I want to kill, then she will be a sword of slaughter. The divine flame sighed softly. A sword of slaughter. The sword precursor's quality would definitely rise when forged with his slaughter intent. After all, it was in the progenitor realm. Progenitor realm slaughter intent? There were probably no more than 3 people with it in the entire history of the large universe. So, a sword forged from it would become a true sword of slaughter. Even if Xianxia wasn't controlling it, it would still be extremely terrifying. The divine flame did as Xianxia wanted in the end. Xianxia sat cross-legged before the furnace while the shattered bits of judgment were on his lap. At this moment, he was repairing it with his sword intent. Time trickled by, and Xianxia's sword intent surged endlessly into it. As for his slaughter intent, it was ceaselessly surging into the pill furnace. In the end, his slaughter intent was so strong that even the divine flame couldn't really endure it. It was truly too strong. Just like that, a month went by. A month later, Judgment suddenly let out a sword howl, and then it floated before Xianxia. Xianxia gazed at it and spoke softly. Thank you for staying by my side until now. Go and seek out your own path. Even though he was blind now, his heart wasn't blind, and he could still use his heart to see. Judgment trembled slightly. Take care. As soon as it finished speaking, it vanished on the spot. It was gone. Judgment hadn't acknowledged Xianxia as its master, and it didn't conform to his sword Dao either. While a sword at Judgment's level was just slightly inferior to the sword precursor, there was something it had in common with the sword precursor. Choice. Sword cultivators weren't the only ones who chose swords. Swords chose their owners too. While Xianxia was strong, Xianxia wasn't the person Judgment wanted. Actually, Judgment had wanted to leave some time ago. However, the sword precursor wasn't there, so it chose to stay with Xianxia for some time. Now that the sword precursor had awakened, it chose to leave. Once Judgment left, the furnace before Xianxia was covered in slaughter intent. The divine flame had turned blood red like a ball of blood within the furnace. It was extremely shocking. Just like that, time trickled by, and 2 more weeks passed. One day, a sword howl resounded from within the furnace, and then a completely blood-red woman walked out slowly from within it. The sword spirit. The sword spirit used to wear a white dress, and she seemed like a goddess from the 9 heavens. Yet now, she was completely blood-red, and even her jet-black hair was blood-red now. Moreover, the slaughter intent she emanated made her seem like a god of death from the deepest reaches of hell. Xianxia combed her hair slowly. Do you regret your decision? She grabbed Xianxia's hand. If you become a god, then I will become a god with you. If you become a devil, then I will become a devil with you. Besides Snowy and Zier, she'd been with him the longest. She'd been with him all this time. Xianxia spoke softly, "Thank you." As soon as he finished speaking, the sword spirit transformed into a blood-red sword that entered his forehead. Or to be more precise, she'd entered his sea of consciousness. Both her quality and strength had been improved tremendously, and she was merely inferior to the Sword Supreme when compared to all the other swords in the large universe. Xianxia turned around with the intent to leave, but the divining flame suddenly asked, "Will you return to the Tao Path?" "The Tao Path?" Xianxia stopped and fell silent. The divining flame was about to say something when Xianxia suddenly said, "They are free to choose whether to help me or not. I don't blame the Tao Path and I don't blame the Tao Progenitor. However, I won't go back there. In the future, we'll go our own separate ways. If you want to leave and go to the Tao Progenitor, I won't stop you." The divining flame fell silent for a long time and said, "Farewell." As soon as he finished speaking, a ball of flames flashed out from the furnace and vanished from the pagoda. It shot through space and vanished from Void Spirit Continent. The divining flame had chosen to leave in the end. Xianxia fell silent for a moment and planned to leave. Suddenly, a golden pagoda appeared before him. "The primordial pagoda." Xianxia asked softly, "Are you leaving too?" The primordial pagoda trembled slightly. It seemed to be conveying something. A short while later, Xianxia figured out what it meant. He rubbed it gently and said, "Snowy will be fine. Don't worry. I'll go get her back soon." The primordial pagoda trembled and flew above Xianxia. A moment later, a strand of golden light enveloped Xianxia, and then the pagoda entered Xianxia's forehead. Bang! A terrifying wave of golden energy swept out from Xianxia. In an instant, countless strands of primordial violet energy throughout the primordial pagoda surged like torrents toward Xianxia. In an instant, he was covered in primordial violet energy. Meanwhile, Little Sky and Xianxia appeared not too far away from him. Xianxia gazed at Little Sky. "What's happening?" Little Sky replied softly, "It's helping him. Helping him." After the previous incident and after Snowy had been taken away, the primordial pagoda stopped acting like it had in the past. Now, it had realized that Xianxia was weak and was very likely to be killed. But if Xianxia died, it would fall unconscious once more. Of course, most importantly, Snowy had been taken, and that had been quite a blow to the primordial pagoda. The primordial pagoda really took Snowy to be its friend. In short, it had realized how important strength was. So, it was helping Xianxia grow stronger. Countless strands of primordial violet energy surged endlessly toward Xianxia under the primordial pagoda's command, and Xianxia's aura gradually started growing stronger and stronger. In the primordial pagoda, Xianxia's aura was growing stronger and stronger, and a long time passed before it gradually calmed down. However, it only took a moment for it to start rising madly once more. Just like that, his aura kept rising and calming down over and over again. The human dimension, nature, sacred ground. The sages of the human race were in the hall there, and they were led by Linjin. The hall was extremely quiet. A long time passed before Linjin asked, "How is it?" An old man near him shook his head. "Chaotic." Everyone was already locked in conflict, fighting and stealing from each other. Now that the experts from the Alliance of All have come, it's even more chaotic now. The old man paused for a moment and continued, "Is he really unwilling to return?" The old man was naturally talking about Xianxia. Lin Zhan shook his head. "He won't return again." Sigh. The old man sighed. "A single mistake cost us everything." Meanwhile, an old man in a luxurious robe stepped forward. "Everyone, the human race is doomed." They gazed at him, and the old man spoke solemnly. "Our strength isn't sufficient to stop the Alliance of All. Presently, all we can do is survive on our own. So, farewell." He turned around and left the hall. They were disbanding. It didn't take long for only a few to remain here. Lin Jin sat down slowly in silence. Actually, he'd expected this. The human race didn't have a leader, and no one was willing to take the position of leader at a time like this. They one who stepped forward at a time like this would definitely be targeted by the alliance of all. Moreover, even if someone stepped forward, what difference would it make? Disband and leave. That was their choice. It was a choice they had no other choice but to make. If they refused to disband, they still couldn't do anything. If they united the entire human race, then perhaps they could resist the alliance of all for some time. However, the human race was in chaos right now. So, uniting the entire human race was something only Yang Yi was capable of accomplishing right now. Leaving was their best option right now. A long time passed before Lin Jin spoke softly. The human race is doomed. Void Spirit Continent. In the primordial pagoda. At this moment, Yang Yi was sitting silently on the ground, while a tiny golden pagoda floated above him. Little Sky and Xianxia were standing not too far away from Yang Yi. Xianxia's arms were around her knees, while she rested her chin against her arm and stared at Yang Yi. Her gaze flickered between one that was icy cold and one that was bewildered. Little Sky had noticed it, so she gently rubbed Xianxia's head. Axiu? You? Xianxia gazed at Little Sky. Her gaze was icy cold to the point that Little Sky's entire body felt cold like she'd fallen into an abyss of ice. Little Sky was shocked, and she gazed at Xianxia with astonishment. Meanwhile, Xianxia suddenly gazed at Yang Yi. Big brother is in pain. As she spoke, she closed her eyes slowly. I can sense it. Losing friends and loved ones is very painful. Little Sky glanced at Xianxia and spoke softly. Axiu, you're really scary sometimes. Xianxia looked up at the sky. I won't harm all of you. Little Sky shook her head slightly. I'm not afraid that you'll harm me. I'm afraid that you'll change. I don't think your big brother wouldn't want to see you change. Xianxia gazed at Yang Yi, and a long time passed before she said, Big brother is a good person. She suddenly gazed at Little Sky and continued, You know, if Big Brother chose to give Snowy away in exchange for peace, then I would kill him myself. Little Sky's expression changed. Meanwhile, Xianxia suddenly stood up and walked slowly to Yang Yi. She gazed at him, and the icy coldness in her eyes eased up slightly. But he didn't. He's still the same Big Brother I know. As soon as she finished speaking, she placed her right hand on Yang Ye's head. The primordial pagoda trembled violently, and a terrifying wave of energy rippled out. But Xianxia's hand didn't move at all. Xianxia glanced at the primordial pagoda. Your energy isn't enough. It isn't enough to help him attain the sage realm. Let me help you. As soon as she finished speaking, a strand of energy seeped out from her palm and entered Yang Yi. In an instant, a terrifying aura swept out from within Yang Yi. But at this moment, Xianxia suddenly clapped her hand lightly, and the terrifying aura vanished without a trace. After that, Xianxia returned to where she'd been just now, sat down, and watched Yang Yi in silence. Little Sky was shocked beyond words. Meanwhile, Xianxia suddenly gazed at Little Sky. Big sister, don't tell him, all right? Little Sky nodded while staring blankly at Xianxia. Just like that, time trickled by, and Yang Ye's body was soundlessly changing. 3 days later, Yang Lianshuang suddenly entered the primordial pagoda and went to Yang Yi. Yang Yi was still meditating on the spot, so she frowned slightly and gazed at Little Sky and Xianxia. How much longer will he take? Little Sky shook her head and was about to speak when Xianxia suddenly said, In a moment. Yang Lianshuang glanced at Xianxia and was about to speak when Yang Yi suddenly stood up slowly. Hiss! 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 Waves of energy flowed out from him, and a short while passed before Yang Yi waved his right hand lightly. Those waves of energy instantly vanished. Huff! Yang Yi slowly let out a mouthful of foul air. Meanwhile, Yang Lianshuang gazed at Yang Yi with astonishment. Why, you're a sage now? The sage realm. Yang Ye's strength felt unfathomable to her right now, and she'd never felt that previously. So, she guessed that he was at the sage realm now. Yang Yi nodded slightly. I'm at the sage realm. A sage. Yang Yi took a deep breath. He hadn't expected himself to attain the sage realm so soon. Based on his estimations, it would take countless years for that to happen. Of course, it was all thanks for the primordial pagoda. If the primordial pagoda hadn't done all it could to help him this time, then it would have really taken him countless years to attain the sage realm. Little Sky glanced at Xianxia and remained silent. Meanwhile, Yang Lianshuang suddenly asked, "How strong are you now?" "My strength?" Yang Yi clenched his fists slowly, and then he gazed at his right fist and said, "I can kill sages with ease, even without my sword." At this moment, his strength had improved tremendously in all aspects. It wasn't just his cultivation. Even his physical strength had risen tremendously. Now, he was confident that he could kill sages with ease, even without using his sword. While he could kill sages in an instant in the past, he had to use his full strength then. Yet now, he was confident that he could accomplish that with ease. Suddenly, Xianxia said, "Sages aren't very strong." Everyone gazed at her, and she spoke softly, "Big brother, what do you think?" "Sages aren't very strong." Yang Yi fell silent for a long time, and then he asked, "Then what do you think is strong? A progenitor?" Xianxia stood up and spoke softly, "Progenitors are all right. They have found their own Taos, and they work hard on it." "Big brother, do you know what the Tao is?" Yang Yi shook his head, walked over to her, and rubbed her little head. "Do you?" She spoke softly. "There are many explanations. However, the more accurate and accepted explanation is defying the heavens to change your fate." Yang Yi frowned slightly. "Defying the heavens to change your fate?" Xianxia replied softly. "The universe has its laws, the 4 seasons have their laws, and all other things in the world exist according to certain laws. For example, the 4 seasons, the rising and receding tide, the rising and setting sun. Big brother, don't you think all of these are a type of law?" Yang Yi thought for a moment and nodded. "Yes." Xianxia asked, "Then do you know why it's like this? For example, why does the sun rise again after setting?" Yang Yi shook his head. Xianxia spoke softly. "No one knows why. Many will say that it's the planets and continents circulating as nature intended. However, why do they do that? Moreover, why do they do that in such an orderly manner? No one can explain that. Because there is no answer, they call it destiny. They say that it is determined by the heavens. Everything is determined by the heavens." Xianxia suddenly looked up at Yang Yi at this point. "So, when we say defying the heavens to change your fate, big brother, you can destroy a planet, but can you make the sunrise and sunset go in the opposite direction?" Yang Yi shook his head. "He couldn't accomplish that." Xianxia spoke softly. "I don't know if anyone can accomplish that. Even if someone can, that person is definitely extremely, extremely powerful. The progenitors you speak of have found their own Tao, or to put it in simpler terms, they've come into contact with the traces of destiny. Destiny is the Tao, and it contains many, many things like the laws of all things, the laws of yin and yang, and the laws of the universe. They followed along these laws to come into contact with the Tao and the traces of destiny. They are quite amazing to be capable of accomplishing that. Quite amazing." Everyone here had quite a strange expression on their faces. Yang Yi rubbed Xianxia's head. "Why do you know so much?" She looked up at Yang Yi and remained silent. Yang Yi rubbed her head gently again and said, "It's fine if you don't want to say. Tell me when you want to." "All right." Xianxia nodded. And then she lowered her head while the expression in her eyes kept changing. Meanwhile, Yang Yi gazed at Yang Lianshuang, and the latter spoke solemnly. "The human race is in severe trouble." Yang Yi shook his head. "It has nothing to do with me." Yang Lianshuang spoke solemnly. "It has something to do with you this time." Yang Yi was puzzled. "Huh." Yang Lianshuang spoke solemnly. "Qin Chuan's clan, they are having a very hard time. Qin Chuan has a younger sister, a sister from the same father and mother. I received information that she has been kidnapped. Currently, damn it." Meanwhile, Yang Yi suddenly spoke fiercely. "I deserve to die." He transformed into a ray of blood-red light that vanished on the spot. In the sky above Void Spirit Continent, a ray of blood-red light flashed through the sky, and the entire sky instantly turned scarlet red like a horrifying ocean of blood. At this moment, Yang Yi wished for nothing more than to slap himself. Qin Chuan and the others were dead, but they had clans and families. But he'd overlooked that. Damn it. Yang Yi raised his speed to his limits, and an ocean of blood was left behind wherever he passed. The human dimension. It didn't take long for Yang Yi to arrive in the human dimension. He frowned as soon as he arrived. The human dimension was covered in blood and slaughter intent. Presently, he was extremely sensitive to blood and slaughter intent, and the blood and slaughter intent here was too thick. Yang Yi fell silent for a moment and descended to the ground. A huge city stood before him, and the sounds of fighting resounded incessantly from within it. Yang Yi walked slowly to the city. Suddenly, the slaughter intent in the city shot up into the air and converged to him like rivers converging into the ocean. Yang Yi naturally accepted it all. While this slaughter intent was weak, sand could be piled up into a castle. The endless flow of slaughter intent would strengthen his own slaughter intent. In these times, Yang Ye's slaughter intent was like a fish in water because the times were chaotic now. It was too chaotic, and the more slaughters occurred, the more slaughter intent would be produced, and his slaughter intent would grow stronger. The slaughter Tao. While Yang Yi was on the path of the sword Tao, he was gradually treading on the path of the slaughter Tao as well. In the city, Yang Yi glanced at the surroundings, and it was covered in destruction. Corpses were everywhere, and it was simply like hell on earth. Boom! Suddenly, a terrifying aura descended near Yang Yi. It was a middle-aged man at the major Zen realm. The middle-aged man sized up Yang Yi. A blind guy. Yang Yi frowned slightly. You're not a human? Human. The middle-aged man chuckled. Humans? From now onward, humans will cease to exist in the large universe. Cut the crap and hand over your spatial ring. I'll let you die a little more comfortably if you do. Of course, the precondition is that your immortal crystals don't disappoint me. Immortal crystals. Yang Yi glanced at the surroundings and walked away. The middle-aged man's eyes narrowed slightly. Looks like you... Hiss! Suddenly, the middle-aged man's voice stopped abruptly, and then his head flew off his neck. Blood sprayed like a pillar. On the ground, the middle-aged man's eyes were opened wide, and he didn't know how he died even until the moment he was dead. Right when Yang Yi was about to leave the city, a woman appeared before Yang Yi. She seemed to be around the age of 17, and she was holding a sword while over a dozen injuries could be seen on her. There were 7 others by her side. There were old people, youths, and women. All of their cultivations were only barely passable. Yang Yi sensed dense slaughter intent coming from them. They were all human. Yang Yi flicked a spatial ring to her. She glanced at it, and there were over 10,000 immortal crystals in it. Over 10,000. It was sufficient to cause quite a commotion. After all, immortal crystals were the most precious thing in the large universe now. They were comparable to a second life. Yang Yi turned around once he did that and planned to leave. But she suddenly obstructed his path. She looked him in the eyes. You're Yang Yi, right? Yang Yi. The others were stunned when they heard that name. Yang Yi. Did anyone in the human race not know that name? He was once the king of the human race. How powerful was the human race before Yang Yi left? Did anyone dare to attack it? Could be said that the humans could keep their heads held high then, because they had Yang Yi, a powerful king. He dared to declare war against the alliance of all, and he dared to fight the Buddhist path and weapon path. The human race had no internal conflicts under Yang Ye's leadership, and the human race was confident to fight any race at that time. However, Yang Yi left in the end. Why? She walked slowly to Yang Yi while 2 streams of tears slowly seeped out of her eyes. Why did you leave? Why did you abandon the human race? Why? Yang Yi replied, I protected the human race once, but it doesn't represent that I'll do it forever. I don't have such an obligation, right? Then have you noticed? Her voice grew loud. The human race is about to die. It's about to die. Yang Yi asked, what does that have to do with me? She was stunned and said, why, you're the king of the human race. You... That was in the past. Yang Yi continued, The human race chose to abandon their king when attacked by the alliance of all. They made that king of theirs face everything on his own. Of course, I understand. So I left. Yet now, when the human race is in trouble, it wants that same king they abandoned to come back and save them? I'm not a savior, nor do I have the ability to do that. Besides that, I made the human race become united, but what happened in the end? The human race starts to fight amongst itself even before the alliance of all attacked or the end times truly arrives. If the human race dies, it brought it upon itself. No one else can be blamed for that. The woman took a deep breath. You can save the human race, you can. But why should I? Xianxia replied with a question. So that you'll leave again when I fight the alliance of all? He patted her on the shoulder and said, I'm not against you or anything like that, but the human race isn't worthy of me doing anything for it. Moreover, I don't have the ability to save the human race. Xianxia vanished once he finished speaking, and only blood red remained in the sky. The woman was stunned for a long time, and then she laughed bitterly. Is the human race really finished? Meanwhile, a middle-aged man walked over to her and spoke softly. Little In, don't think too much about it. Actually, he's correct. We chose to draw the line between him and us when the alliance of all attacked, and we made him face their sages on his own. Not to mention him, anyone would probably not return to the human race after that. The woman shook her head and spoke softly. But now, perhaps only he can save the human race. The middle-aged man sighed softly. Why should he come back? We didn't take his side when the alliance of all attacked. Moreover, even if the alliance of all doesn't attack now, we're still engaging in internal strife. We've all gone crazy killing each other for spirit energy, so no one can stop it. He glanced at the surroundings and said, No one can save the human race. It didn't take long for them to leave. Presently, the only thing they could do was flee as far as they could and avoid encountering any expert from the alliance of all. Of course, they had to be careful of the human race's experts. At most times, enemies from the outside weren't the most terrifying. It was the enemies from within who were most terrifying. They were much more terrifying when they acted ruthlessly. Dawn City. Xianxia arrived at an ancient city called Dawn City. It was Qin Chuan's home, and the Qin clan was here. Just like the city he came from, it was in chaos too. It was filled with corpses, blood, and slaughter intent. Xianxia glanced at the surroundings and went straight to the Qin estate. The door was closed tight, and there was faint light all around it. Obviously, it was a formation. Xianxia walked to the entrance. Suddenly, a middle-aged man appeared in front of him, and a spear shot swiftly toward Xianxia's forehead. However, it was grabbed by 2 fingers. The middle-aged man was visibly astounded. You? Xianxia released it and said, Who's the patriarch of the Qin clan? The middle-aged man gazed vigilantly at Xianxia. Who are you? Xianxia replied, Take me to the Qin clan's patriarch. Don't make me repeat myself. The middle-aged man spoke solemnly. Why you? Suddenly, Xianxia stomped his foot down lightly. Bang! The entire estate shook violently, and the formation around it instantly shattered. The entire Qin estate was alarmed. It didn't take long for a middle-aged man in an embroidered robe to appear in front of Xianxia with a group of old men. When he saw Xianxia, the middle-aged man's expression changed drastically. Why you? The middle-aged man was the Qin clan's patriarch, one of the human race's sages. So he naturally recognized Xianxia. Now that he saw Xianxia, he was naturally filled with shock. The others clearly recognized Xianxia too, and they were extremely shocked as well. But it didn't take long for quite an unsightly expression to appear on their faces. Is he here to look for trouble? Xianxia suddenly asked. Who's Qin Chuan's father? The others from the Qin clan exchanged glances, and it didn't take long for a man to walk over to Xianxia. I am. Xianxia nodded slightly. Uncle, do you want to stay or leave? You can come with me if you want to leave. Qin Chuan. At this moment, everyone recalled Qin Chuan. Only now did they recall that Qin Chuan was someone Xianxia called a brother. Obviously, Xianxia wasn't here to look for trouble but to help. Qin Chuan's father heaved a sigh of relief in his heart. He hesitated for a moment and said, And my daughter, Qin Chuan's younger sister, was kidnapped by an expert of the devil race. He said he's going to make her his furnace. Please, Yang Yi nodded. I'll go to the devil dimension. Qin Chuan's father bowed respectfully to Yang Yi. Thank you, Yang Yi asked. So do you want to stay or leave? The others gazed at Qin Chuan's father, and there was a trace of a pleading expression in their eyes. Qin Chuan's father hesitated for a moment and sighed softly. This is my home. Yang Yi nodded. I understand. Yang Yi flicked a spatial ring to Qin Chuan's father, and then he vanished on the spot. But a strand of blood-red sword energy appeared in the sky above the Qin estate. It just floated there in the air. It didn't take long for news of Yang Ye's arrival in Dawn City to spread. At the same time, when some experts from the Alliance of All came to the Qin estate, they glanced at the blood-red sword energy and left Dawn City. Dawn City suddenly became peaceful. No one dared to cause trouble in Dawn City, and no one dared to cause trouble for the Qin estate. That blood-red sword energy represented that the Qin estate was under Yang Ye's protection. In a room within the Qin estate, Qin Chuan's father gazed at the spatial ring before him. There were 2 streams of tears on his face. Chuaner, you have a good brother, but you'll never come back again.